All right, let's dive in. Today, we're talking about one of the most powerful and, honestly, essential political thinkers of the 20th century, Hannah Arendt. Her ideas weren't just for dusty books in a library. They were forged in a time of absolute crisis, and you'll see they speak to our world today with, well, a pretty incredible urgency. This quote right here, this is the key to understanding everything she wrote. I mean, think about it. Imagine you're walking down a dark, steep staircase. You reach out for something to hold on to, something to guide you, a banister, right? Well, for Arendt, the horrors of her time, Nazism, Stalinism, had completely ripped that banister of tradition off the wall. The old rules, the old maps of good and evil, they were just gone. So the question that drove her entire life was, how in the world do we navigate this new, terrifying reality all on our own? So that's where we'll start, by really getting a feel for the world that shaped her. Arendt's philosophy, you have to understand, is not some abstract game. It is a direct, gut-wrenching response to the political nightmares she saw and experienced firsthand. I mean, just look at this timeline. Her life was completely defined by rupture. Born a German Jew in 1906, she's a refugee by 1933, running for her life from the Nazis. This experience of being stateless, of being persecuted, it wasn't just a sad part of her biography. It was the raw material for her entire political philosophy. She wasn't just theorizing about tyranny from a comfy armchair. She was trying to make sense of the force that had just blown up her life and the entire world. Arendt was convinced that these new regimes were something else entirely. They weren't just a worse version of an old tyranny. No, they had broken what she called the thread of tradition. Basically, our connection to the past was severed. We couldn't look back for reliable answers anymore. And that left her with this massive, life-defining question. How do we think? How do we judge, and how do we act when all the old rule books have been burned? So her first major attempt to answer that question was to give a groundbreaking diagnosis of this new political disease. Before she could even think about a cure, she had to figure out exactly what it was and how it worked. And she was adamant about this. She called it the horrible originality of totalitarianism. For her, this wasn't just a more brutal dictatorship. No way. This was a totally new form of government with a totally new goal. Not just to control people, but to literally remake human nature itself. So how did this monstrous thing actually function? Well, Arendt basically took the machine apart to see its gears. She argued that it preys on lonely, isolated people, the masses, by giving them these simple, airtight explanations for everything in a confusing world. It uses a messy, chaotic government so no one can ever really be held accountable. And it enforces its will with what she called an iron band of pure, constant terror. And at the very heart of it all, the concentration camps. They weren't just prisons, they were laboratories for total human domination. And this is where we get to the absolute bone-chilling core of her analysis. The ultimate goal wasn't just power or money. The goal was to erase human individuality, to get rid of spontaneity, to reduce the beautiful, messy variety of human beings into nothing more than an interchangeable bundle of reactions. It was a horrifying attempt to prove that individual people don't matter, that we can be made completely, utterly superfluous. But here's the thing about Arendt. She didn't just leave us staring into that abyss. After that dark diagnosis, she offered up this powerful, positive vision of what human life is supposed to be. She built a real, powerful alternative to tyranny. The direct opposite of total domination is what she called the vita activa, which just means the active life. And this is her whole framework for understanding the basic things we do that make us human and that connect us to the world and, crucially, to each other. So she breaks this active life into three distinct parts. You can almost think of it like a pyramid. At the bottom, there's labor. This is just the endless cycle of keeping ourselves alive. Growing food, eating it, sleeping, necessary stuff. Then there's work. This is when we create lasting things that build up our world. A table, a house, a piece of art. But for Arendt, the very top of the pyramid, the thing that is most uniquely human, is action. This is us appearing in public, speaking and acting with other people to start something new in the world together. Yeah, action is where it's at. It's where freedom and politics actually happen. It's rooted in this idea she called natality, which is just a fancy word for the simple miracle that every time a child is born, a new beginning, a totally new and unpredictable potential enters the world. And to happen, it requires plurality, the fact that we're all different. We live in a world of other unique people.
And when we act and speak together, we don't just show off what we can do, we reveal who we are. For Arendt, this is the only source of real political power.
Now, this idea of political action is incredibly powerful. But Arendt's thinking took another huge, crucial turn when she started to really zero in on the role of the individual. And this led to maybe her most famous and definitely her most controversial idea.
The whole story starts at the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem back in 1961. Now, Eichmann wasn't some low-level thug. He was the guy with the clipboards and the train schedules. He was the logistical mastermind behind shipping millions of Jews to the death camps. Arendt went to cover the trial for The New Yorker, and she fully expected to come face-to-face with a monster.
But what she found was, in a way, even more terrifying. Eichmann wasn't some diabolical genius. He wasn't a raving, fanatical sadist. He was a bureaucrat, a careerist, a man who spoke in clichés and corporate jargon. The thing that defined him, she wrote, was this profound shallowness, a curious, quite authentic inability to think. It was like he literally could not imagine things from someone else's point of view. And this experience just forced her to rethink everything. She used to write about radical evil, which she saw as something deep, demonic, almost Shakespearean. But Eichmann, he represented the banality of evil. And listen, this is so important. When she says banal, she doesn't mean the crime was trivial. Of course not. She means the person, the motive, was shockingly normal. The evil was thoughtless, superficial. It could spread, as she put it, like a fungus, because it didn't require monstrous people, just people who failed to think. So if the problem is thoughtlessness, then what on earth is the answer? Well, this brings us right to the top of the mountain, to the culmination of Arendt's entire life's work, her final answer for how to live in a world without banisters. The antidote, she realized, is thinking. It's that simple and that profound. Not some high-level philosophical gymnastics, but the basic human activity of stopping and thinking. That is our #1 defense against both the tidal wave of a totalitarian system and the everyday, quiet temptation to just go along with the crowd. And when Arendt says thinking, she means something really specific. It's that silent conversation you have with yourself, the 2-in-1, as she called it. It's you talking to you. She noticed that the very few people who refused to go along with the Nazis weren't always the most educated or the most religious. They were the ones who simply asked themselves a question. If I do this thing, will I still be able to live with myself afterward? And this creates a really clear path for us. That act of thinking, that internal back and forth, is what creates a conscience. And having a conscience is what gives you the ability to make a judgment, to tell right from wrong on your own, especially when all the external rules, all the social banisters have completely fallen away. So, in the end, Hannah Arendt's work isn't some invitation to escape from the world. It is a powerful, urgent call to engage with it. It's a reminder that freedom isn't something we're just given. It's something we do. And our most basic political and moral responsibility is to think for ourselves. Because every single one of us is responsible for the world we all share. And that really just leaves us with one final, pretty urgent question for our own time. In an age of social media bubbles, of constant noise, of intense political pressure to just pick a side, are we protecting our ability to stop and think? Or are we, maybe without even realizing it, letting it waste away? That is the challenge Hannah Arendt leaves with us today.